So I have a crazy theory about the messaging system found in Elden Ring. In a lot of ways, it feels almost like a weird Zoomer type invention. We live in a world that's so overstimulating and everything seems to be vying for your attention. And so I think the messaging system is just another tool that these games use in order to keep you hooked on and continue playing. So before we get too deep, let's first talk about how the messages are intended to be used by the players. Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all of these games have always been online, and even though you might think of them as single player games, they're really multiplayer games. I feel like you run into invaders and summons more often in the Dark Souls games just because those games are smaller, but they are still very much a feature of Elden Ring. At any moment, you can be invaded by a player from another world, you can invade another player's game, and even if you're not playing directly with someone, even if you're not invading them or aiding them in fighting a boss, you still see notes and signs and blood spots from other people. Blood spots, for instance, depict how other players died so as to give you hints for what you're about to face. Sometimes whenever you're playing, you just see these white phantom type characters, and so far as I understand these phantoms, they're just other players who are actively playing through the same area as you are. And then finally we come to the topic of the video, the messaging system. Essentially, a message is just a note you leave behind for other players to read. It's a message in a bottle type concept, where essentially you write something and then someone else somewhere in the world will read it. You don't know who will read it or how many people will read it. You do get feedback on your messages in the form of ratings. Players can rate a message as good or poor, but past that, you don't really know how your messages are being received. And aside from rating someone's message as good or poor, you can't respond to a message directly. You don't know who left it for you. And so the idea with this message system is that players are intended to help one another. So for instance, messages can warn you that there is an enemy to your right up ahead. Or they can give you a hint as to the location of armor, or where a special item is. They can help direct you to a weapon or a talisman, a new shield. And so that, I think, is how the messages are intended to be used. But of course, there are always going to be mischievous tricksters and those who wish to beguile and lie to others. So you see this all the time where someone will tell you, hey, there's a hidden path here. And then you go to hit the wall and there isn't a hidden path and you just look like an idiot who just hit a wall for no reason. If people wanted to, they could lie to you and say that a boss has a certain weakness when it doesn't in reality. And it makes the messaging system more interesting. It has a slot machine style effect to it now. Instead of knowing for sure whether or not you're being told the truth, there's now a question to it. Studies have shown this over and over again, but for people, an inconsistent reward is more stimulating than a consistent reward. That's why gambling is so addictive. Whether or not people realize it, there is something stimulating and exciting about not knowing what you're going to get. And then finally, there is a third type of message, which is just the message that is funny. Messages that fall into this third category are crass or silly. You see a lot of these messages that say Fort Night, or Mist or Beast, try fingers butthole, and I feel like these messages play a really special role, but all in all, these are more or less the different types of messages that you can leave in Elden Ring and in the Souls games. Now you might be asking, why would you even bother leaving a message in the first place? Wouldn't that just be distracting you from the game? But the incentive for leaving a message behind is that if a person rates it as good, then you receive a heal. You could be in the middle of a boss fight and all of a sudden your health bar goes up and you just receive a message that says message was appraised. So there are times when leaving a message can literally save your life in game. So leaving messages behind is very much something that is encouraged by From Software. And this messaging system is nice and all, but you might be wondering, Noah, why are you bothering to make an entire video about the messaging system? And the reason why is because I think that it might be a lot more complicated than it may first appear. The Souls games are really unique because most other games don't have a messaging system like this. A system like this would be really helpful in like a survival horror game. So if you're playing Resident Evil 2, for instance, it would be cool if you got a message from another player saying, hey, there's a zombie up ahead, or hey, there's a puzzle item over here. But you don't get those kinds of messages in that game. And you don't get those kinds of messages in the overwhelming majority of other games. What this means is that most single player games are just focused experiences. In the overwhelming majority of single player games, your experience is not influenced by other people. In Doom, you just play through the game. Everyone plays through the game on their own unless they're playing in co-op or multiplayer or something like that. And so what this means is that whenever you play through most single player video games, your attention is focused solely on the game and on the experience immediately ahead of you. So the messaging system in Elden Ring and the Dark Souls games turns the game into an almost communal experience. You can play the game offline, you don't have to read messages from anyone or experience invasions or bloodstains or whatever else. But I do think that your experience is enriched by playing online. But the thing is that the messaging system, even though it has more player involvement than other single player games, it doesn't have the same player involvement that most multiplayer games have. So for instance, in something like CSGO or League of Legends or Valorant or one of the other many big multiplayer games, you typically have the option to type into chat, to chat with your team, and quite frankly, this leads to a lot of really bad things. If you play one of these games online, then yeah, sometimes you'll have a good team, sometimes your voice chat will be nice. But in my mind, whenever I think of CSGO multiplayer, for instance, all I can think of are just really unkind words and slurs and that sort of thing that get thrown around. And in those games, the involvement from other players can completely overwhelm your experience of the game. So even though Elden Ring does have some sort of player communication in the form of messages, it's not the same as the typical multiplayer game. I didn't realize this until I first started writing this essay, but whenever you experience art, it's not like you're always alone. For instance, whenever you watch a movie, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's with other people. And if you're watching it with friends or something, then maybe you're talking to each other over the movie, maybe you're responding to the movie in real time. Your reaction to the movie is influenced by their reaction, which is in turn influenced by yours. Whenever you're listening to music or you're at a live show, you're experiencing that piece of art in the moment with other people. And sometimes, even if you're reading a book, your copy will have annotations in it from the previous owner. Sometimes the annotations are good and they're very insightful, and other times it feels like they were left behind by a fourth grader. So it's kind of hit or miss with regards to those. So I think the messaging system turns Elden Ring and Dark Souls into a much more communal experience than it otherwise would be. I think really at its core, the most special thing about Elden Ring's messaging system is how it fulfills our need for novelty. It would be impossible for Elden Ring to display every single message to you at once. The game has sold like 12 million copies or something like that, and so who knows how many messages have been left behind by other players. And so what this means is that you only see a limited selection of messages at any given moment. But each time you load into the game, the messages in the area are different. And there are only a limited number of words and phrases that you can use to assemble your messages. This keeps the game clear of any bad words, any slurs, anything like that. But I think that the word collection is large enough so that way you're still able to get a large swath of ideas across. Even with simple messages, you're still able to reference big things to other players. But anytime I'm playing Elden Ring, there's a part of my brain that sees a message and then wants me to click on it. Even if there's not really a reason for me to click on the message, I still want to click on it and see what it says. And I think this is pretty normal. Humans are a social animal, so it only makes sense that you care about what people think or have to say, whether or not you want to. But I think that my desire to click and to see all the other messages and bloodstains and whatever else, I think it's kind of a symptom of the modern world in some ways. I think that the new messages really help to stimulate our attention. We live in a very lonely culture, and I think that the modern world has become very lonely. People spend a lot of time alone, but the thing is that they're usually not just sitting in silence. They usually have music playing, or they're listening to a YouTube video in the background. Maybe this one. Even if we're eating, we constantly need stimulation. We can't just sit with ourselves in a blank room. Or even if we get bored out in public for 5 seconds, even if we're with other people, then inevitably we will whip out our phones and just start going through the internet, looking at memes, looking at social media, whatever. It feels like we always just need something to stimulate our attention. Our attention is always being drawn in so many different directions. And so I think that in a weird way, the messaging system of Elden Ring and the FromSoft games kind of fulfills that same function. Video games are incredibly stimulating, and if you just played Elden Ring with no messages on, then you would have a perfectly stimulating game. But at the same time, the messaging system makes the game more stimulating and in the end makes it more addictive because of that. And it's a very minor thing, the messaging system. And if the game sucked, if Elden Ring was a bad game without the messaging system, then a messaging system isn't going to make it good. But at the same time, I think that the messaging system just adds a little bit of novelty and stimulation to your experience. I think the messaging system elevates these games a little bit higher. I think the Elden Ring messaging system fills the same function as something like a comments section on a YouTube video or on an article. How many of us read the comments on a video while we're watching a video? And by the way, if you've done that, if you've checked the comments at any point during this video, then I would appreciate it if you would leave a comment. And it would be really cool if you could make it sound like an Elden Ring message. If you left a comment saying fort, night, ! That would be cool. Mist or beast, ! You don't have the right, oh you don't have the right, therefore you don't have the right. Loverad. That's me. And then I think there's one more function that the messaging system fulfills. I think that messages in the game can help to raise and lower the tension when necessary. So I made a video earlier this year called Humor and Horror, and I think the video is mostly noteworthy because it shows me shooting Batman's parents. But really, in that video, the reason I bring it up is because I discuss how tension plays a role in horror. I talk about the idea that in order for a piece of horror to be effective, it needs to have its highs and it needs to have its lows. If you want to make a really scary work of fiction, it can't be scary 100% of the time. You need to scare someone and then you need to pull it back a little and let them rest and let them regain their composure, and then you need to scare them even bigger, and then after that you let them rest and you regain their composure, and then you scare them even more. And essentially the point I was trying to make in that video was that horror, in order to be effective, needs to be like a roller coaster. If you're going full throttle at 100% all the time, then you simply won't be able to maintain the horror necessary to make the work scary. You have to scare the person and then let it go, and then scare the person and then let it go. And I think that the same principle, even though it may not be immediately obvious, applies to the Elden Ring and Dark Souls games. The games are known for being very difficult. That is the idea that From Software has built their reputation on. They make hard games. Whenever you're first starting to play these games especially, they're really hard and they're really intense. And so I think that the messages can serve to help lighten the mood somewhat. If you're stuck on a really difficult boss and then you just see a message that says "try finger butthole," then you're probably gonna laugh. It will make your experience of playing the game a little bit more enjoyable. And so I think along with that, the messages can serve as little tiny distractions away from the game itself. And that sounds silly because the messages are a part of the game. But the messages distract you from the core gameplay loop for just long enough that you're able to take a momentary break and then go straight back in. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're able to play a game like this for hours, or at least why I'm able to. And of course, I think if you're playing on PC, like I do, if you're playing on Steam, then there's even another layer of distraction and stimulation added on top of that, just because you can receive Discord alerts whenever you're playing a game on PC. Whenever I'm on PC, I can be listening to music or playing podcasts or whatever else. And so I feel like those sorts of things fill the same function as the messages, in that they distract you from the game for a little bit. And with that distraction, as with the roller coaster, it allows you to come back into the game fresher. I think if nothing else, our culture is one of overstimulation. I think that even though the Elden Ring and Dark Souls games are so fantastic, I think that the messaging system is just one other reason for their success. It's just one more reason why they are the global phenomenon that they are. And I think it's a very understated reason. It's a very non-obvious reason for their success. I don't think it's immediately obvious just how much it helps them. But again, I do think that the messaging system is certainly a reason why the games have been so successful, even if you don't really think about it. People need stimulation in their lives. People crave stimulation. So even though they seem like stupid little things, I actually think the messages play a big role in how we interpret and how we enjoy these games. And I would argue that the messages can even help the game feel more balanced than maybe it actually is. So for instance, sections of the game can feel unfair, but if you see messages in the section warning you of how to overcome certain obstacles, then I think that you will feel like the game is fair. So I think even there, the messages can impact how we see the game, and especially how we discuss it with one another. So to conclude this video, I would like to read off some of my favorite messages that I've seen in Elden Ring these past few weeks. No dragon ahead, but seems familiar. I always like these messages where they say that something seems familiar, because usually it's in reference to another Dark Souls game. For instance, this message is in reference to Dark Souls 3's Midir fight. Didn't expect friend. This one's cute because of the penguins. Why is it always a bloodstain? Seek skill. I like this one because it's making fun of all the people who suck at the game, and is essentially just telling the players to get good. Let there be fingers, butthole. If only I had a giant, butthole. Mist or beast. You don't have the right, oh you don't have the right. Seems familiar, but no archer ahead. This is in reference to a Norlundo from the first Dark Souls. Praise the dog. Could this be a house? Therefore time for edge. I feel like the percentage of messages that are related to edge have increased intensely since the start of this year. Didn't expect snake. It's like a dream. Snake eater. Secret tunnel. Could this be a snake? It's just a rope. Visions of water slide. And then rat. This is a reference to Dark Souls 1's depths area. Edge lord ahead. That one's funny. Are you ready? Oh, are you ready? All the more, are you ready? Oh, are you ready? Are you ready? Oh, are you ready? By the way, are you ready? Oh, are you ready? Fort Knight. Try fingers, but hole. Try fingers, but hole. Likely giant, but whole. I like this pair of messages because I came to a Statue of America. The one in front of her said first off rump, and so you walk to her behind, and then you just see a message that says try fingers. Time for sacrifice. I like this one because it's in reference to Dark Souls 1's good ending. Mist or beast. Visions of castle. I like this one because it's like, yep, there's a castle right freaking there, you don't have to tell me. Try fingers, butthole. Try taking on all at once. Butthole. Time for head, and then offer rump. So, I guess you're supposed to offer rump to the headless man. Could this be a friend? Praise the message, and then try door. The joke is that the door was locked. Mist or beast. Fortnite. Seek friendship. Didn't expect lover. By the way, if you're trying to get some appraisals, offer fingers. I like this because it's telling you to high five this guy. Why is it always dog? They say about a turtle. Dog, oh dog. Dog ahead. Pickle, butthole. Dog. This one actually made me laugh out loud because it says dog, but then it's not a freaking dog there. Message ahead. I like this because you'll find messages often where they're just messages telling you that there's a message in front of you, and it's like, wow, amazing. Blood loss, butthole. Ah, edge, so to speak, time for sleep. Elden Ring, oh Elden Ring. By the way, Elden Ring, oh Elden Ring. Mist or beast? Why is it always dung? First off, just getting started. In short, just getting started. Lover ahead, therefore time for pickle. Could this be a lover, therefore time for head? Fortnite, mist, or beast? Why is it always Elden Ring? So this has been my video about messages in Elden Ring and Dark Souls. Thank you for watching. Check out my other stuff. I have a couple other Dark Souls videos if you want to check those out. I have a bunch more video essays. Be sure to leave a comment that is reflective of your favorite Elden Ring message. And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and have a nice night. Bye.